When I was a little kid, my father always took me to the baseball field. He and his teammates were sweating on the field and enjoying the sport to the fullest. I loved baseball too, and I was eager to learn the sport from my father. However, as I slowly grew up, my interests began to change. When I saw a soccer game, I was fascinated by the fast running and passing on the field. I immediately fell in love with the sport, and I wanted to be a good soccer player. I talked to my father about the idea, but he didn't seem too happy about it. "Don't you like baseball anymore?" he asked. "I like baseball, but I want to be a soccer player more," I replied. My father seemed a little disappointed, but he respected my decision and supported me to pursue my dream. He often took me to soccer games and bought me the equipment and shoes I needed. This experience of mine happened in May of 2003. My classmates and I were attending a friendly soccer match. The weather was great and my teammates and I were in great shape. The game was very intense that day. During a ball grab, I was standing in my own half of the field and my teammates were preparing to pass the ball to me. The ball was flying high and I had to jump up to catch it. However, one of the opponent's players was also jumping up to compete for the ball. He was much taller than me. In the process of jumping, he hit my temple with his elbow. I felt a strong shock. Instantly, I felt as if I had fallen out of the sky and my body was completely out of control. My brain seemed to stop working instantly. Strange images and sounds began to appear in my mind, as if I had entered a completely unfamiliar world. As I floated in the air, I saw the soccer field below me. My coach and other teammates gathered around me, and the coach's expression looked nervous. He reassured the other players while telling those around me not to get too close and to try to keep the air circulating. I felt very light now, as if a feather was floating in the air. This feeling made me feel very wonderful. I also felt very scared because I didn't know what would happen next. Suddenly, a tunnel appeared above me. When I entered the tunnel, I saw a young lady. She was very beautiful. Later I realized that she was my grandmother. Only she looked a little younger. She smiled and said, "I have been waiting for you." This surprised me, and I couldn't understand why she was waiting for me, since we hadn't met before. When I felt confused, she seemed to already know what I was thinking. She said, "I am waiting for you because you are lost and I will help you find your way home." I was surprised. "How did you know what I was thinking?" I asked. She replied, "In heaven, there are no secrets." Her expression was conveyed to me in a nonverbal form. The feeling was truly amazing. I had never had such an intimate and direct way of communication. She told me that there is no hypocrisy or concealment of any kind here. You don't need words to communicate here because there are more efficient ways to communicate in heaven. No one lies here because everyone knows what each other is thinking. I inquired of her, "And how do you plan to get me back on the right path?" Her answer surprised me even more when she said, "When you were created, you knew what you were going to be. Unfortunately, you have lost your way." I was surprised because I never thought I would lose my way. "If the soul is lost, it will not find its way home," she continued. Near-death experiences are God's way of helping them. I was even more confused when I heard this statement, and I didn't understand if it meant I was about to die. She seemed to sense my unease and she reassured me, "Don't worry, my child, this is just a wake-up call. You must gain strength from it and find your way again. Some souls will choose to stay in heaven and give up their life on earth for a while. And some souls will choose to return to Earth to continue their lives and return to their families. She explained that God loves all His children. He wants them all to fulfill their mission. He won't judge them if they don't succeed the first time. He will keep giving them chances until they have fulfilled their mission. I asked her, "But I don't know now what kind of person I should be. And what do I need to do next?" I was a little surprised and disturbed when she told me that I had to talk to my father. I asked her, "Does this mean I have to talk to God? He should be very busy, right?" She led me to a huge staircase. I didn't see God, but I could hear His voice. He called out my name and then welcomed me by name. I was amazed because it was the first time I had ever heard God's voice. His voice was so warm and comforting that it made me feel very relaxed. He told me that He was always watching over me. I felt very shocked inside because I never thought I would be watched by God. I immediately felt very small and God was so great. God said, "Do you remember what you asked me to discuss before?" I couldn't answer Him because I didn't remember ever talking to Him. God gently put His finger on my forehead, and then I began to remember what had happened before. I used to have a dream to become a professional soccer player. I spent a lot of time and energy chasing that dream, but ultimately failed. When I came back here, I realized it wasn't what I really wanted. I wanted to be a lawyer with integrity and provide legal assistance to those who could not afford to defend themselves. I expressed my thoughts to God. He told me that it was a noble desire and that He would always support me and help me achieve this dream. I said to God, "I know what I should do now. I am ready to go back." A smile appeared on God's face and then said, "I will also give you another option. If you feel that this life is a failure now, you can also stay. You can also try to return to earth life again later. In heaven, time is not a problem, and we will always wait for your decision." I asked God, "What will happen to my family if I stay?" God replied, "Your family will come here to reunite with you after you finish your own mission." But God also reminded me that if you stay here, your mother will be very sad. Hearing these words made me feel conflicted. I like the feeling of being here. But I also don't want to make my mother sad. God said that He would support me no matter what I choose. I decided to go back to Earth and be with my family. Before I left, God told me that He would always be watching me wherever I went. He also reminded me that love exists within everyone and that I can feel it all the time if I want to. When you finish your mission, there will be a place for you in heaven. The lady next to me asked me if I was ready to go back. I nodded and replied, "Yes, I am ready." She said to me, "After you go back, say hello to your mother for me and tell her that I love her." I asked her in surprise, "How do you know my mother?" She didn't answer my question, she just said, "You will get the answer after you tell your mother about it." I didn't understand what her words meant, but I thought she must have her reasons, so I promised her that I would convey this information to my mother. I suddenly appeared in a hospital room. I was lying on a hospital bed. Family members and medical staff were all around me. Looking at my own body, I did not feel fear. I felt very calm. Suddenly, I felt myself being pulled back into the real world. I heard the sound of someone talking around me. When I opened my eyes, I saw my mother. My mother had been crying. She saw me open my eyes and hugged me excitedly. What was happening here? I asked the paramedics around me. "It's okay, you're going to be fine. You have a mild concussion." I told my mother that I had met a lady in heaven. She told me to say hello to you. Mother's eyes were filled with surprise and confusion. She asked me who the lady was and I told her I didn't know. This confused the mother even more. The nurses around me were also looking at me, and they obviously thought I was lying. I realized that it was probably not a good idea for me to tell anyone else about my experience in heaven. When I got home, my mother was eager to know more details about the lady, and she asked me to describe her appearance and characteristics. As I described it, my mother gave a surprised look. Finally, my mother went into the storage room, as if she was looking for something. I asked her what she was doing. She didn't answer me. About half an hour later, she held a picture in her hand. My mother asked me if this was her. I took the picture and saw that it was the same lady I had met. Her smile and appearance were exactly the same as I remembered. I was surprised and asked my mother, "Who is this?" My mother choked up and said, "She is your grandmother." My mother explained that my grandmother had passed away 8 years before I was born. She was a very kind and benevolent person who spent all her energy on her family. I realized that I had met the grandmother I had never met. She gave me guidance and comfort. This experience made me believe that deceased loved ones are somehow interconnected with us. While in college, I chose to major in law. I completed my studies with honors. I was also actively involved in various charity activities on campus, hoping to make my contribution to society. This is what I always wanted to do. After graduation, I joined a charity organization and became a volunteer. I use my free time to provide free legal assistance to those in need. I always believe that the law should be fair and everyone should be treated justly. I receive emails from many people every day. I will answer each email carefully and do my best to help them solve their problems. In the process, I feel that life is very fulfilling. I knew I was doing something worthwhile. I did not forget my commitment to God. When I got married, my wife was also very understanding and supportive of my work. We have a lovely son. I will play soccer with him often. Although I didn't become a soccer player, I got fun and relaxation from it. My family life is full of love and happiness. This is my story. I believe that if we strive to pursue our ambitions, we can have a full and meaningful life.
On April 3, 2008, I was doing housework at home. Suddenly I felt a severe pain in my abdomen, as if something was burrowing in my stomach. The pain became more and more intense and I could hardly bear it and finally passed out. When I woke up, I found myself in the hospital with my husband at my bedside. The doctor told me that my condition was serious and that it was acute appendicitis. The doctor explained that the appendix is a small tube-like organ located at the end of the appendix. If it becomes infected or blocked, it can cause inflammation and pain. If left untreated, the appendix can rupture, leading to serious complications or even life-threatening conditions. My doctor told me that I would need to undergo excisional surgery to treat my appendicitis. I was concerned about the risks of the surgery, and the doctor assured me that it was a routine procedure with minimal surgical risks. After careful consideration, I agreed to undergo the surgery. That afternoon, I underwent the surgery. The surgery went well. The doctor made a small incision in my abdomen and then removed the appendix through an endoscope. After the surgery, the doctor told me that everything had gone well and that my appendix had been completely removed. Although the procedure went well, I needed to stay in the hospital for a while to make sure I was fully recovered. During this time, the doctor discovered that my wound was infected. The doctors needed to perform a second surgery on me. They tested the fluid in the infected area and found staph bacteria in it. My second surgery began. The doctor gave me an anesthetic, but after a long time, I could still hear sounds around me. I heard the doctors sighing as they talked about my little 2-year-old daughter, whom I may never see again. They also talked about my family, my father, and my husband. Why are they talking about me and my family like this? I'm still alive, they shouldn't talk like that. Don't they know I can still hear them? I felt very confused and angry. My situation was not good at that time. Most of my body was invaded by staph bacteria. It was very complicated to completely eliminate this bacteria. During the first surgery, no one knew the cause of my infection. The tools used by the doctors were sterilized. I woke up in the intensive care unit. I opened my eyes and found my family gathered around me, their faces full of sadness. I had an oxygen tube inserted into my throat and had no way to communicate with them. I wanted to tell them, "It's not that bad, I feel fine." The doctor asked me how I was feeling and I made a victory gesture. The doctor walked out of the room to talk to my parents. I heard their conversation. "What does she have, doctor? What should we do now?" My mother asked anxiously. The staph had just started to spread, but it was very dangerous. My husband asked the doctor, "How serious is it?" The doctor replied in the affirmative, "Very serious. The doctor says I may now have brain damage. We are considering some kind of antibiotic to treat the bacteria in her body. We have 2 options to give her antibiotics, but there are also risks associated with this approach. If we drop the treatment, you will lose her in a few days." My parents and husband went home sad. Because there was no extra bed for them in the hospital. My throat felt very sore. I wanted to tell the nurse next to me, but I had no way to speak. I asked the nurse to give me a pen and a piece of paper. I told the nurse, "My throat hurts." The nurse in charge of me touched my head and said, "It's normal to be a little uncomfortable, but she can't take the tube off." About 2 hours later, I experienced the most memorable event of my life. One nurse said to another nurse that she was going to pick up her daughter from school. After a while, the second nurse said to me, she was leaving for a while, she was just going to get a drink of water. Not long after the nurses left, I felt my breathing start to become difficult. As some sputum was produced, the tube was blocked. It prevented oxygen from reaching my lungs. I had no way to call out loud. My body squirmed and I couldn't do anything. A few seconds felt like hours. Just at the same time, the alarm sounded. A large group of doctors and nurses entered my room. I heard their panicked screams. They were calling for a team of specialists. They seemed to be shouting like madmen. I could hear everything, but I couldn't breathe anymore. The doctor put some fluid in a tube to try to suck out the phlegm. I stopped breathing and my heart stopped beating. Then, I left my body. When I opened my eyes again, I saw myself floating in the air in my hospital gown. I now felt very relaxed and the pain was gone. I could see my body and many doctors were surrounding it. Suddenly, I felt a mysterious force descending from above. It was coming closer and closer to me and seemed to be taking me out of this world. I felt very scared and didn't know what to do. I kept resisting because I didn't want to leave my family and my body. I was afraid that if this force took me away, I would never come back. But the power was too strong. All my resistance was useless. Eventually, I gave up and realized that I was going to leave this world. Finally, I was taken away by this force. I started a wonderful journey. I saw a very huge tree, the top of which I could not see. The tree shone with a dazzling light. There were many small animals around the tree, and they were getting along in harmony. I felt at peace here, and they radiated a kind of love I had never felt before. Their voices penetrated my soul. I continued to float upward, and my body became more and more relaxed. This relaxation was not only external, but also internal. More wildlife appeared before my eyes. It was the first time I saw so many wild animals at the same time. They were very different from the animals on Earth, and their colors were different. They were all very friendly, as if we knew each other. I continued to walk forward. I saw a lot of children. They had different skin colors, and they came from different areas. Each one was unique and beautiful at the same time. Everyone was happy, and every child had a smile on their face. They were playing and running in the fields. I looked in the direction they were running, and I saw a beautiful garden. There was a huge fountain in the center of the garden. I walked toward the garden, and on the way I saw many people. There were teenagers and middle-aged people. I saw harmony and happiness. People were smiling, and I felt the power of love. Around the fountain, there were flowers of all colors. People were sitting around, talking and smiling with each other. It was as if they were communicating with their consciousness. Some people were reading books in the garden. Here, I did not feel uncomfortable or hurt in any way. I suddenly thought of my parents and husband. I knew they were suffering now. I stopped worrying when I thought that they would also come here later. I continued on a little further, and I could see a large group of old people. The old people were smiling, and all looked very energetic. They were walking in a garden full of flowers with a beautiful river next to them. Suddenly, I saw a light in the distance. Could this be my final destination? The closer I got to it, the stronger the love I felt. The light seemed to be calling to me, telling me that it was my final destination. I slowly approached the light and felt its warmth and peace. I felt myself surrounded by it, as if I had merged into its embrace. The light brought me a feeling I had never felt before, an overwhelming purity of love and peace. I felt my soul become lighter and freer. This beautiful place made me feel overwhelmed with happiness and contentment. I am grateful for the mysterious force that led me here and made me feel this wonderful sensation. I felt a hand touching the top of my head. In this moment, I was overwhelmed with intense love. I heard a gentle voice, "Stay calm, you can't stay here yet." I had a lot of questions I wanted to ask, but in this moment, I started my journey home. I thought, am I only going back in this rough way? The experience was so beautiful. I saw myself in a hospital bed, and the doctors were resuscitating me. I knew that this mysterious force was still with me, and it made me feel a love and peace like I had never felt before. But I didn't want to go back into my body yet. Suddenly, the voice sounded again, this time more clearly and firmly. He told me, "I have too much to do, too many people need me." I realized that I could not just leave this world. That my mission was not yet complete. The mysterious force eventually sent me back into my body, and I felt a sharp pain. When I opened my eyes, I saw many doctors surrounding me. I felt a lot of heat in my chest. At this moment I started to shout, "No! I don't want to go back, I don't want to go back." No one heard me. I was desperate because I didn't want to stay here. I slowly fell asleep. It was as if no one cared what I wanted. Everyone wanted to take me back to this place of pain. During the time I was gone, my heart stopped beating. The doctors did not give up on me. After a long time, I regained my heartbeat. A doctor stayed with me all night. At first, I felt confused and disoriented. I blamed the doctor for bringing me back. Several hours passed before I gradually came to my senses. It was then that I slowly came to terms with what had happened. I told the doctor about my experience. After the doctor heard my story, he was silent for a while. Then he began to tell me some stories about near-death experiences. He said that these experiences are not rare and that many people have similar experiences. He told me that this mysterious force could be a belief or faith deep inside me. He asked me if I had any religious beliefs, and I said I did not. I began to wonder if I should seek a faith to help me understand this experience. The doctor told me that faith can help people be stronger in the face of death and hardship. After hearing the doctor's words, I felt much more relaxed. I returned home with very mixed emotions. On the one hand, I was thankful that I was able to return home and see my husband and family. On the other hand, I was confused because I could not explain the scenes I had experienced. I tried to tell my husband about the light I had seen and the power I had felt, but he did not believe me. He hugged me and reassured me, "Honey, it was probably just a hallucination you had during the surgery, don't worry too much about it." I understood him very well. After all, it was a very strange and unexplainable experience. I sat on my bed and thought back to that experience over and over again. I remembered clearly the voice telling me that I still had a lot to do and that there were many people who needed me. I began to think about the meaning and purpose of that voice and tried to gain some insight from it. Even though my husband didn't believe me, I didn't have the slightest doubt about the authenticity of the experience. I knew it was a real experience that I was experiencing, not a hallucination or a side effect from a drug. I am convinced that this experience will have a profound impact on my life for years to come. I feel grateful to be alive and to have the opportunity to do something important. I think I should cherish this opportunity and try to live a meaningful life.